Elena Hart had always believed she understood every version of Adrian Blackwell, the billionaire, the prodigy, the tech emperor whose name appeared on magazine covers more often than the seasons changed, but nothing in her 28 years of life prepared her for the version sitting across from her tonight. The dim amber lights of the rooftop restaurant softened the hard edges of his jaw, making him look less like the ruthless CEO the world feared and more like the boy she grew up with, the boy who used to chase her through the dusty street of their childhood town with a water gun in hand and laughter in his voice. Yet despite the nostalgic echo between them, there was a sharp tension in the air, something unspoken pressing on the edges of the night. Elena sensed a storm brewing inside him long before he finally exhaled a slow, heavy breath and said the 9 words that shattered her entire universe. "I need you to have my baby, Elena. Please." The word please was what froze her. Adrian never pleaded, he commanded, negotiated, outsmarted, and dominated. But he never pleaded. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass, her heart pounding so loudly she felt the sound vibrating inside her ribs. She blinked at him, convinced she had misheard, but the seriousness in his dark eyes told her he meant every syllable. "You what?" she whispered, her voice barely a sound. Adrian dragged a hand across his face, frustration and vulnerability flickering together like 2 flames wrestling for dominance. "I need an heir," he said, then paused, swallowing hard, the words seemingly painful for him. "No, my grandmother wants to see an heir before his voice cracked before. He caught himself, his facade slipping for the first time in years. "Her heart is failing, Lena. The doctors aren't giving her much time. She keeps worrying about the company, about the legacy, about me, and she asked for one thing. Just one." Elena felt her own throat tighten. She adored Mrs. Blackwell, the fierce old woman who treated her like family from the day Adrian introduced them. She had always been the only softness in the cold, marble empire of the Blackwell dynasty. "Adrian," Elena said gently, "I'm sorry. I didn't know she was worse." He nodded, jaw clenched, as if admitting weakness cost him oxygen. "I need to give her peace of mind, and I can't trust anyone else with something this important. I cannot marry someone for show. I can't pretend to love someone just to create a child. I don't want a socialite or a gold digger raising my heir." Then he looked at her, really looked at her with those intense eyes that always made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "You're the only woman I trust completely. The only one who has never asked me for anything. The only one who's always been honest with me." Elena's heart trembled, hope and heartbreak colliding violently inside her. Because for 12 long, torturous years, she had been hopelessly, silently, irrevocably in love with the man sitting across from her. She had loved him the way the moon loved the tide, quietly but endlessly, always pulled even when she tried to resist. But Adrian only ever saw her as his best friend, his constant, his safe place, his anchor, the woman he trusted with everything except his heart. So when he said he needed her, she almost allowed herself to believe he meant something more. Almost. But then the truth hit her like cold water. He didn't want her. He wanted a womb he could trust. A body he felt safe with. A decision that was logical, convenient, practical, nothing more. Elena forced herself to breathe, her hands trembling beneath the table. "Adrian, you know I've never," he cut her off gently. "I know you're a virgin." Heat flooded her cheeks, a strange mix of embarrassment and sadness curling in her stomach. He said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, as if her most intimate vulnerability were simply another bullet point in a business negotiation. "That's part of why I asked you," he added softly, leaning forward, elbows on the table. "I want this to be safe, respectful. I want you to be comfortable. I'll make sure you're taken care of. Physically, emotionally, financially, everything." He reached across the table, fingers brushing hers, and she felt sparks she had buried years ago flare to life instantly. His touch had always undone her, and he would never know. "I'll be there every step of the way," he said quietly. "You won't go through anything alone. I promise." Elena's heart cracked at that word promise, because she knew Adrian Blackwell could promise her anything except the one thing she wanted most, a place in his heart. He wanted her body. He wanted her genetics. He wanted her loyalty. But he did not want her love. He did not want her. And yet when she looked into his eyes, desperate, raw, almost pleading, she knew she couldn't say no, even if it meant sacrificing her heart. Even if it meant giving him a piece of herself she could never take back. Even if it meant living with the ache of knowing their child would tie them forever, but he would never truly be hers. "Okay," she breathed, almost inaudibly. "I'll do it." Adrian exhaled like a man saved from drowning, relief flooding his features as he stood up and pulled her into his arms. He held her tightly, protectively, gratefully. And Elena stood rigid in his embrace, her face pressed against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of cedar and smoke, feeling everything and nothing at once. Because, while he held her like she was his world, he had no idea she had just given him something more valuable than her body. She had given him the last untouched part of her soul. When he finally pulled back, the softness in his eyes made her chest ache. "You have no idea what this means to me," he murmured. "If only you knew," she thought. The ride back to his penthouse was silent, heavy with emotion he didn't understand. She stared out the window, city lights blurring like melting stars, as tears threatened behind her eyes. She blinked them away. Adrian didn't notice. He never noticed her tears unless they fell. He was too busy planning, too busy calculating medical schedules, legal agreements, laboratory options, timelines, logistics. The pregnancy was a project to him, a mission, a solution. But to Elena, it was everything she had ever wanted twisted into something that hurt more than heartbreak. When they stepped into his penthouse, Adrian walked ahead, still talking. "I'll have my lawyer draft a contract. Nothing complicated. Just protection for you." She barely heard him. Her eyes had drifted to the framed photograph on his wall, the one of them at age 13, her hair in messy braids, his arms slung around her shoulders, both laughing at something stupid. That was the boy she fell in love with. The man standing before her now was someone she loved even more painfully. "Lena," he asked, noticing her silence. "Are you okay?" She forced a smile. "Just tired." He nodded slowly. "I know this is a lot, and I'm asking for more than I have any right to. But you're the only person I trust. I won't let anything hurt you, except you," she thought. "You're the only one who ever could." When he walked her to the elevator, he brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so gentle her knees nearly weakened. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're saving my family." The elevator doors slid shut between them, and Elena finally let a single tear slip down her cheek. She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to steady the ache ripping through her. She had just agreed to have a baby with the man she loved, a man who would never love her back. And worst of all, he didn't even know what she had just sacrificed. Adrian Blackwell had asked her for a child, and without fully understanding it, Elena Hart had given him herself. Fully, completely, irreversibly. And this was only the beginning. Elena woke the next morning with a heaviness pressing on her chest, the kind that felt like she had swallowed a storm whole, and it was now swirling inside her ribcage with no escape. Sunlight streamed through her curtains, warm and golden, but she felt none of its comfort. She had barely slept after leaving Adrian's penthouse. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moment replaying again and again, his face earnest, hopeful, relieved when she said yes. A yes she had given him out of love, but at the cost of her heart. As she sat up in bed, hugging her knees to her chest, she wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life, or the most selfless decision she was ever capable of, maybe both. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it with trembling fingers, knowing before she even looked whose name would appear on the screen. "Adrian, breakfast. Need to talk through next steps. I'll pick you up in 30. Her heart lurched painfully, not because he texted, but because of the tone. Efficient, focused, purposeful. Like this was a business strategy meeting, not a life-altering decision involving her body and soul. She typed back a simple okay and forced herself out of bed. She chose a light blue dress, one he had once said made her look calm and annoyingly angelic. It was stupid, she knew, but some small part of her wanted desperately for him to notice her today, not as the logical choice for a biological partnership, but as a woman. As his woman. She shook the thought away. Hope was dangerous. She applied a touch of makeup, enough to hide the exhaustion under her eyes, but not enough for him to think she was trying too hard. Then she tied her hair back with trembling hands and stepped outside just as Adrian's black Bentley pulled up. He stepped out the moment he saw her, looking devastatingly like the man she had loved since childhood. Sleek dark hair, fitted charcoal suit, confidence pouring from him like a second skin. But today there was an unusual softness in his eyes. "Morning," he said, his voice warm, as if last night had brought them closer. She swallowed the ache in her throat. "Morning." When he leaned in and kissed her forehead, something he didn't do often, it almost destroyed her. He didn't understand what that kind of touch did to her. He didn't know it felt like giving her breath only to take it away. "Come on," he murmured. "We have a lot to go through." A sick twist pulled at her stomach. She hated that phrase, "go through." As if this were a checklist. As if she wasn't breaking quietly inside. They drove to a private breakfast lounge he often used for important meetings. It overlooked the city, sunlight hitting the glass windows like diamonds. The table was already set, fresh pastries, fruit, and Adrian's favorite dark roast coffee steaming in front of him. But Elena barely touched her food. Adrian noticed immediately. "You're not eating." She forced a small smile. "Just not hungry." He frowned, leaning back in his chair. Lena, this is going to be a big physical commitment for you. You can't skip meals. The concern in his voice was real, genuine, but it hurt. Because it came from responsibility, not affection. I'll eat later, she said softly. He didn't push further, instead sliding a folder across the table. Thick, glossy, intimidating. Her heart dropped. What's this? She whispered. The contract, he said, clearing his throat. For your protection, for boundaries, for rights. I wanted everything to be clear so there are no misunderstandings. She stared at the folder like it was a ticking bomb. A contract meant permanence, commitment, proof that last night wasn't a dream or a nightmare. Adrian opened it and began explaining it item by item, his tone steady, businesslike. You'll have full medical care, the best specialists. Full access to my resources, during pregnancy and after. And if you ever need anything, literally anything, you call me. Elena nodded numbly. He flipped another page. We'll live together during the pregnancy. I don't want you alone or unsafe. Her breath hitched. Live together? He nodded as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. Of course. It's important for the baby. And for you, I want to be present through everything. Present. The word wrapped around her heart and squeezed. To him, it meant responsibility. To her, it meant a fantasy she wasn't allowed to have. He continued, unaware of the war happening inside her. We'll handle PR together. No one needs to know the details. Not the media. Not the shareholders. Not anyone. This will stay private. She felt her throat tighten again. Of course he wanted secrecy. The world would never understand why a billionaire chose his virgin best friend to bear his heir instead of a glamorous supermodel or a powerful heiress. She wasn't good enough for his public image, just good enough to carry his legacy. She looked down at her hands to hide the sting of that thought. You'll be financially supported, he added, for the rest of your life if you want. You won't have to work again unless you choose to. I'll set up a trust in your name. And in the baby's. The baby. Their baby. The thought made her chest ache with both longing and fear. Adrian, she said shakily, are you sure about all this? I've never been more sure of anything. He answered immediately, and that hurt most of all. He wasn't sure about marriage. Or relationships. But he was sure about using her for this. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You're the one person who's always been there for me, Lena. I trust you more than anyone. I need you. She felt tears sting her eyes, but blinked them away. What about you? She asked quietly. He frowned. What do you mean? This is your child too. What do you want out of this? Adrian didn't hesitate. I want my grandmother to have peace before she goes. I want an heir who's raised by someone who values kindness, not greed. And, he paused, eyes softening. I want this child to have a mother who's strong, loyal, honest. Someone like you. The heartbreak inside her expanded until it almost burst. Someone like you, not you, never you. She nodded, her throat too tight for words. Adrian smiled faintly, unaware of the devastation brewing inside her. So, he said, tapping the contract, if you're okay with everything, we can sign today. Elena hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the pen. This was the moment, the irreversible point. Once she signed, there was no taking it back. She would carry his child, live with him, share a life with him. But never his heart. Elena? He asked gently. If this is too much, we can take more time. I don't want you to feel pressured. You already pressure me without knowing it, she thought. But she forced a small breath and nodded. I'm ready. And with a shaky hand she signed. Adrian's relief was instant. He stood, circled the table, and pulled her into his arms, again warm, strong, reassuring. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. You have no idea what this means to me. She wished he meant you mean everything to me. Not this means everything to me. When he finally pulled away, he cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing softly across her skin. I'll take care of you, I promise. And those words, those soft, protective, utterly sincere words broke something inside her, because she believed him. And that was dangerous. He led her out of the restaurant, hand gently on her lower back, guiding her as if she were fragile, precious. And God, how she wished he knew how deeply she felt that touch. Once they reached the penthouse, Adrian showed her a newly renovated room next to his. You'll stay here, he said. It's close, so if you need anything day or night, I'll be right there. 100 emotions twisted inside her. Living next to him, seeing him every morning, hearing his voice every night. It was a dream and a torment wrapped together. Adrian, she whispered, are you sure about us living together? Of course, he said simply. This is our child. We're a team. I'd never leave you alone through this. A team, not a couple, never a couple. She swallowed her heartbreak as he gave her a tour of the room and explained plans for doctor appointments, health checkups, and future arrangements. He was thoughtful, caring, responsible, and so utterly blind to the woman standing right in front of him, silently falling apart. When evening came, they stood on the penthouse balcony watching the city lights shimmer like fallen stars. Adrian leaned on the railing beside her, hands in his pockets, the breeze pushing his hair back. "You scared?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "A little. Don't be." His deep voice wrapped around her like warmth. "I won't let anything happen to you." She turned to him, eyes searching his face. "Why me, Adrian?" He looked confused. "I told you." "Not the reasons you listed," she said softly. "Why me, Adrian? Out of every woman you could have chosen?" He looked at her for a long, intense moment. Then he spoke. "Because when I think of family, you're the only person who feels like home." Her breath caught. Her heart stopped. He said it so simply, so honestly, completely unaware that those words alone could ruin her. She whispered, "And what if I give you everything and end up with nothing?" Adrian frowned, stepping closer. "You'll never have nothing. You'll have me. Always, but not in the way I want." Her heart screamed, but her lips said nothing. Because even if he gave her only a fraction of himself, she would still take it, even if it destroyed her. As night settled over the city, Adrian walked her to her new room. He kissed her forehead again, lingering a moment longer this time. "Good night, Lena." "Good night," she whispered. When he left, she closed the door and leaned against it, sliding down to the floor as silent tears spilled down her cheeks. She had signed the contract. She had agreed to carry his child. She had stepped into a life intertwined with his. But she had also stepped into the one thing she feared more than anything. A love that would drown her while he never even noticed. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew the real heartbreak hadn't even begun yet. Alina hardly slept her first night in Adrian's penthouse. Not because the room was unfamiliar or because the silence felt too heavy, but because every breath she took carried the ache of knowing. He was just across the hall, close enough to touch, yet impossibly far from her heart. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wrapped in the soft linen sheets he had picked out specifically for comfort. Gesture that felt both thoughtful and cruel, because kindness from him was the very thing that kept her trapped in love. Every sound in the penthouse became amplified in the quiet night: the whir of the air conditioner, the faint hum of the city below, and once the soft creak of the floorboards outside her door. Her pulse jumped, wondering if it was him checking on her, but no knock came. She told herself it was better that way. She was fragile tonight. One gentle look from him might break her completely. When dawn finally spilled pale gold across the floor, she forced herself out of bed, washed her face, and tied her hair back, trying to look composed instead of heartbroken. She stepped out into the hallway and froze. Adrian was standing outside her door, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, hair slightly messy as if he hadn't slept either. His eyes lifted to hers the moment she appeared, and something warm flickered across his features. "Relief." "Morning," he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. "Hey," she managed. "Were you waiting?" He shrugged, but a faint flush touched his cheekbones, rare for him. "I just wanted to make sure you slept okay." "I didn't," she wanted to say. "Because of you. Always because of you." But instead, she smiled a polite, composed smile. "I'm okay." His brows furrowed. He always sensed more from her than she wished he could. "If anything feels over, that was tell me. We're in this together." The words warmed her and hurt her at the same time. Together, but not the way she wanted. Never the way she wanted. "I made breakfast," he added, nodding toward the kitchen. She blinked, surprised. "You cooked?" He raised an eyebrow. "What, you think I can't?" She tried not to smile, but it slipped through anyway. "I vividly remember the time you tried to cook spaghetti in high school and nearly set the kitchen on fire." Adrian groaned deeply. "We promised never to speak of that again. Yet here we are," she teased, and for a moment, for just a split breath, it felt like old times before money, before fame, before contracts and heirs and heartbreak. But the warmth flickered out just as quickly when they sat at the kitchen island. He placed a plate in front of her: eggs, toast, fruit, and she noticed how carefully he watched her reaction. "I tried to make something healthy," he said. And suddenly she understood why he cooked. It wasn't habit, it wasn't convenience. It was an attempt, a gesture, an unspoken thank you. And it made her chest tighten painfully, because these small moments were what she had always loved him for. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, but Adrian, the man who tried. "It's perfect," she whispered. He smiled, slow and sincere, and her heart nearly collapsed under the weight of it. They ate in a silence that wasn't awkward, just heavy with the new reality between them. She kept catching him glancing at her, and every time, her pulse fluttered traitorously. "We have an appointment today," he said after a moment. "Dr. Klein." She's the best reproductive specialist in the state. Elena's fork paused. The words were gentle, informative, and terrifying. This was happening. It wasn't just a conversation, or a contract, or a theoretical future. It was real. Today, they would take steps toward creating a child together. Her heartbeat, already unsteady, began racing. Are you nervous? Adrian asked quietly. She nodded. A little. I'll be with you, he said, and the earnestness in his voice nearly melted her. You don't have to worry about anything. But she did worry about everything. About what this meant. About how close they'd become. About how much more painful it would be when he eventually moved on, fell in love with someone else. Maybe even had more children with another woman. The thought made nausea twist in her stomach. She set her fork down. Adrian, before we go today, I think we should talk. He stiffened slightly, eyes narrowing with concern. About what? She swallowed hard. About how this is going to work. Between us. He sat back in his chair, studying her. Work? Living together. Sharing space. Being, she hesitated. Close. A flicker passed through his eyes, something unreadable. Lena, this doesn't have to be complicated. But it was. It would always be complicated. What if people see us together like this? She asked quietly. What if your board thinks we're together? Let them. The certainty in his voice stunned her. Adrian, we're adults, he said simply. And you're living here because I want you safe. I don't care how it looks. She stared at him, stunned, because it almost sounded like something more. But she didn't allow hope to stir. Hope was dangerous. Let's take this slow, he added gently. One day at a time. Okay? She nodded. Because what else could she do? After breakfast, they drove to the clinic in comfortable silence, though her pulse hammered the entire time. Adrian rested his hand on the console between them, close enough that their fingers brushed every time the car turned. Every brush felt like fire on her skin. When they arrived, the nurse greeted Adrian with the kind of respect usually reserved for royalty. Mr. Blackwell, we've been expecting you. Dr. Klein will see you and Miss Hart immediately. Miss Hart. The name felt small, insignificant. She wondered if the staff assumed she was his girlfriend or worse, a surrogate. Adrian placed a hand on her back, guiding her gently. You okay? Just overwhelmed, she whispered. He leaned closer. I'm right here. Don't overthink. You don't realize you're the reason I overthink. But she stayed silent. They entered a softly lit consultation room. And Dr. Klein, the confident, silver-haired specialist, smiled warmly at them. So, she said, tapping her pen, I understand you two are planning to start a family. Elena's heart skipped. Family. Hearing the word from a stranger made it feel intimate. Real. Terrifying. Adrian nodded. Yes, we want to discuss the safest and most comfortable approach. She wished she didn't love that word so much. Dr. Klein began explaining the options: natural conception, IVF, hormonal planning, timelines. Elena tried to absorb the information, but her mind blurred the details. All she could think about was the moment the doctor asked, and emotionally, are you both prepared for this step? Pregnancy will bring you physically closer, mentally closer. It changes relationships, even for the strongest friendships. Elena froze. Adrian didn't. We're prepared, he answered without hesitation. We've known each other our whole lives. Not the question. Not the point. Elena forced herself to smile, nodding even though her insides twisted. After the consultation, the doctor left them alone to discuss privately. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Adrian turned to her. Hey, he said softly. You zoned out. You okay? She swallowed, just taking everything in. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender. Too tender. You don't have to do this if it's too much, he whispered. I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself for me. The words nearly broke her. I'm not sacrificing, she lied. I'm choosing. He searched her face. Why? It was the one question she couldn't answer truthfully. Because I love you. Instead, she said, because I care about you. Because this is important to you. And because your grandmother, she's like family to me too. He exhaled deeply, relief softening his expression. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. No, she thought, you don't. But I love you anyway. They left the clinic hand in hand, his doing, not hers, and the contact lit fires across her skin. When they reached the car, Adrian surprised her. He opened her door, then paused, looking down at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. Thank you for doing this with me, he said, voice low. You have no idea what it means. I'm just trying to help, she whispered. You're doing more than helping. He brushed his thumb across her cheek again. He was touching her more today than he had in years, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Her heart stuttered violently, but then he stepped back, clearing his throat. Let's go home. Home, his home, their home for now. All the way back, Elena felt his gaze drop to her more than once, as if he were seeing her differently. Or maybe she was imagining it. She often imagined things she wished were real. That evening, the tension between them was palpable, thick, warm, unfamiliar. They moved around each other in the penthouse like two magnets pulling closer without touching. At one point, she bent to pick something up, and when she stood, Adrian was right behind her, closer than ever. Close enough to feel the heat of his chest on her back. Close enough that her breath caught. Close enough that the air shifted between them, charged, electric. He didn't step away. Not immediately. He whispered, "Sorry," but his voice was low, rough, almost trained. As if he felt something he didn't understand. She nodded quickly, stepping aside before her heart betrayed her. Hours later, they ended up on the balcony again, city lights flickering beneath them. Adrian stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "Today was a big day," he said quietly. "Are you scared?" She nodded. "A little." "Me too," he admitted, surprising her. "But I'm glad it's you." The words hit her like an arrow. She looked at him, eyes soft. "Why do you trust me so much, Adrian?" He hesitated, then said the one thing that nearly shattered her completely. "Because you're the only person who's never left me. Everyone else wanted something. Everyone else walked away. But you stayed." Her eyes burned. He didn't know she stayed because she loved him. He didn't know she'd always stay, even when it hurt. "I'll always be here," she whispered. He turned to her then, really turned, his gaze lingering on her face as if searching for something unnamed. "I know," he said softly. His hand lifted slowly, hesitantly toward her cheek, and for a terrifying, beautiful moment she thought he might kiss her. Her heart raced. Her breath hitched. She leaned in just slightly, but at the last second he dropped his hand. "Get some sleep," he whispered, stepping back. The moment shattered like glass. Elena nodded, blinking back tears, and retreated to her room. When she closed the door, the dam inside her finally broke. She lay on the bed, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, her heart aching for something she couldn't have. He had almost kissed her. Almost, but almost meant nothing, almost only hurt more. And as she drifted into restless sleep, one truth settled deep inside her. This was only the beginning of the heartbreak to come. The next morning, Elena woke up earlier than usual, her heart pounding with the heavy knowledge that nothing in her life would ever look the same again. Not after last night, after Liam's words, his confession, his selfish yet oddly sincere request that she become the mother of his child. She stood before the mirror, brushing her hair with slow mechanical movements, trying to understand what part of her still felt tethered to the old version of herself and what new, fragile version was forming beneath the surface. She had always dreamed of marriage first. A family built on love, a slow bloom of affection, leading into a shared life. Yet here she was, contemplating a baby with a man whose heart she had adored quietly for years, and who saw her as everything except the woman he could choose. When she entered the dining room downstairs, Liam was already there, sitting stiffly, a cup of untouched coffee in front of him, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He stood when she walked in, a gesture both polite and painfully distant, and she felt the sting of it. "We need to talk," he said. And she nodded, though dread settled in her chest like a stone. They sat across from each other at the long marble table, sunlight spilling across the floor between them like a line neither dared to cross. "I don't want last night to overwhelm you," he began, his voice calm but strained. "I know it sounded like I was asking too much, but I want you to know you would never be alone in any of it. I would take care of you. Completely." The word care cut her sharply, because it wasn't the one she wanted, not love, not devotion, not a promise that her heart mattered, just care, responsibility, obligation. She swallowed hard to speak. "Liam, I need to understand something. Why me? Why not one of the dozens of women in your world who would agree in a heartbeat?" His jaw tightened, his fingers curling around the handle of his cup. "Because I don't trust them. They want my money, my name, my empire. They wouldn't care about the child, just the leverage. But you," he looked up at her, and for a moment she saw the boy she'd grown up with, not the billionaire the world chased. "You're the only person in my life who has ever cared about me and not my wealth. If I have a child, I want them to come from someone good, someone kind, someone who isn't poisoned by the world I live in." His words were honest, raw even, but they still weren't the kind she needed. "You're asking me to give you the most intimate, vulnerable part of myself," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're asking me to give you a child when you don't even want me." His eyes widened in pain, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he lowered his gaze. "You deserve love, Elena. The right man, the kind who can give you a normal family. I'm not that man." She felt her breath stutter, because part of her had always known that, and yet hearing it aloud made something inside her unravel. She stood abruptly, pushing back her chair, and paced to the window, looking out at the vast garden behind the mansion. "I need time," she said, her voice steadier now. A decision like this, it changes everything. My future, yours, the child's? I need to think. Liam nodded immediately, relief flickering in his features that she wasn't saying no. Take all the time you need. Anything you want, anywhere you want to go, I'll arrange it. Or you can stay here, if that's easier. She waved a hand dismissively. No. I need space away from you, just for a little while. The sharp flicker of hurt in his eyes made her chest twist, but she couldn't let herself soften. Not yet. He had no idea how deeply he was asking her to sacrifice herself. She went upstairs, packed a small bag, and left the mansion without another word. She walked for almost an hour through the quiet streets until she reached a small cafe, one she used to visit during their college days when she needed to think. She ordered tea and sat by the window, watching people moving through their ordinary lives without billionaire proposals or emotional chaos. She thought about what it meant to have a child, what it meant to raise a baby with a man who didn't love her but trusted her more than anyone else. She imagined holding a little boy or a girl whose eyes would mirror Liam's, whose smile would carry the warmth she longed for. And she imagined the pain of being near him but not his, pain of parenting in a world where she would always remain second in his heart. Was that fair to her? Was it fair to the child? But another truth thrummed quietly inside her. She had always wanted to be a mother, and there was something sacred in knowing Liam wanted her to be the one to carry his legacy. Hours passed before she returned to the mansion, her mind not clearer but heavier with the weight of decision. When she walked inside, Liam looked up from the living room, where he'd been pacing endlessly. His relief was immediate, written plainly across his features, but he didn't approach. "Did you decide?" he asked cautiously. She approached him slowly, and his breath caught when he noticed the trembling in her hands. "Before I give you an answer," she said, "I need to know what you want from this. Do you expect this to stay transactional? Are we raising the baby together? Am I moving into your house? What happens when you eventually marry someone else? Because she won't like that I'm the mother of your first child." His brows knitted deeply. "Elena, listen to me." He stepped closer, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I'm not planning to marry anyone. I'm not planning a life with anyone. I've seen what relationships turn into in my world. I've seen how marriage becomes leverage, how children become bargaining chips. I don't want that for myself and certainly not for my child. I'm asking you because you're the only person who could give me a family without turning it into a weapon." She stared at him, and for the first time, she saw the loneliness beneath his wealth, the deep fear hidden under his controlled exterior. He wasn't asking her for convenience, he was asking her because he trusted no one but her. That realization made her throat tighten. "And what about me?" she whispered. "What if I fall in love with you more than I already?" She cut herself off too late. Liam froze. His eyes widened slowly, his breath halting, and silence spread like heat between them. "Elena," he said, voice barely audible. "You." She looked away, ashamed, but he stepped closer. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" She laughed bitterly. "Because you don't want love, Liam. And I didn't want to ruin what we had." He lifted a hand, hesitated, then gently touched her arm. "You didn't ruin anything." She looked up at him, and for a moment the world felt impossibly still. But then he pulled back. As if afraid of crossing a line he refused to blur. Elena sat down on the couch, burying her face in her hands. "This is killing me. I don't know if I can separate the motherhood from the feelings." Liam sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "You don't have to separate anything. I'm not asking you to shut off your heart. I'm just asking for a chance to build something stable. It doesn't have to be romantic." She winced. "That's the problem. I don't know if I can survive being near you while you stay emotionally inaccessible." His expression softened with real guilt. "If I could change that part of myself, I would. But I don't know how to love the way people expect." "Yet you want a child," she said emptily. "Yes," he admitted, "a child I can protect. A child who won't be raised in the shadows of the life I live." Elena took in a shaky breath. "And you think I can give that to you?" "I know you can," he said gently. Silence wrapped around them again, but this time it wasn't painful, it was contemplative. And then she asked the one question she hadn't dared before. "If I say yes, how do you want to do this?" His jaw tightened. "However makes you comfortable. IVF, medical process, or..." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Natural?" He swallowed hard. "Only if you wanted that. I don't expect it." The tension between them thickened with unspoken thoughts and forbidden imaginings neither dared explore. Elena's heartbeat echoed in her ears. "I need rules," she whispered, "boundaries, agreements." Liam nodded immediately. "Anything you want. I'll hire an attorney to draft it, but you'll approve every word. You'll get full control over your body and medical decisions. You'll never have to worry about money again. I don't want your money," she snapped. "I want security for the child and peace for myself." He softened. "Then that's exactly what I'll give you." She hesitated, her fingers twisting together. Okay, then we make a contract of expectations, of responsibilities, and of... She paused, emotional distance. That last part visibly hurt him, though he nodded. If that's what you need. They talked for hours, outlining everything from medical considerations to living arrangements. They decided she would stay in the mansion during the pregnancy for safety, but after the birth, they would evaluate what arrangement felt healthiest for both of them. They agreed the child would carry his last name, but that she would be the primary emotional guardian. They discussed education, religion, travel, inheritance, topics that made the idea painfully real. By nightfall, they both sat exhausted, emotionally drained, yet strangely connected. "Elena," Liam said quietly as she stood to leave the room, "thank you for considering this, for not walking away." She smiled faintly, sadness lacing through her expression. "I'm not doing this for you alone. I'm doing it for the child who doesn't exist yet. Someone who deserves more than what we had growing up." He nodded, and for a moment, he looked like he might say something deeper, but he didn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. As Elena walked to her room, she paused at the doorway, touching her belly instinctively, imagining life forming there someday soon. She knew the decision wasn't final, not truly, not emotionally, but the path had begun. And whether it led to heartbreak or to something unexpected, she would face it with strength. After all, she had always been stronger than Liam believed. And as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she whispered to herself, "Whatever happens, I can survive it." Yet even as she said the words, a part of her wondered, was she preparing for motherhood, or for the heartbreak of giving herself fully to a man